Hello there. This is my Daredevil movie pitch/fanfiction. It's a bit long for a pitch and not quite developed enough to be considered fanfiction, I think, but who cares? The main story takes place over several months, between 3 months and 10 months after the blip. But the beginning consists of a lot of flashbacks. So this is before Matt has met Peter Parker, and before Fisk was shot by Maya. This video contains spoilers for all 3 seasons of Netflix's Daredevil, and there are a lot of characters and references that won't make much sense if you haven't watched it anyway, so seriously, go watch it if you haven't already. You will not regret it. It's a lot better than this. So, here we go. Daredevil, the Venom King. The movie opens with Matt in a dark alley fighting some criminals. They aren't very powerful, but he's yelling at them that he knows they're connected to Wilson Fisk, who they might know as Kingpin. They aren't telling, but he won't stop beating on them. Then there's a flashback to Matt's days at the orphanage. He's maybe 13 or 14, old enough to have been trained by Stick. He's in the confessional with Father Lantom, and he says, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." He takes off his sunglasses, puts down his cane. There's nobody around, and besides, Lantom knows he's not a normal blind kid. There's no need to pretend. He tells Lantom that what he really wants, now that he can use his abilities and fight, is to go after the men who killed his father. He says he knows revenge is wrong, but it's all he's been thinking about since Stick trained him. And Lantom asks him, "Do you want to kill these men?" A long pause. It's clear Matt doesn't know how to answer. "No." "But you want to hurt them?" "Yes." "Matthew, do you know why we're supposed to love all people as our neighbor?" "Because the church says so." "No," says Lantom, "because it's the way the world is. Because we are made in the image of God, who is love. Because if we get out of the pattern of loving, we become separated from God. God knows this about us, and that is why he gave us the command to love all people, even our enemies." "I don't know if I can love them, Father." "Try, Matthew, with all your heart and mind and soul. Hate will isolate you. It will destroy your friendships and your ability to love yourself. It will destroy you." Cut back to the present. Matt keeps beating on those guys until they are all passed out around him, and he stops, panting, looking at his bloody hands. So, as the Marvel logo unfolds silently, we hear the news report from the day Thanos' goons invaded New York. There's the sound of drink glasses, muttering and screaming on the news, and people calling their friends and families to make sure they're okay. And the logo ends, and we're in Josie's bar, a cluttered, grimy, but friendly space full of pool tables and regulars who mostly seem to know each other well. However, the atmosphere is tense today. We focus on Matt, listening to the news with Karen Page and Foggy Nelson, his coworkers and best friends. The TV reporters are talking about aliens in New York, and though his friends try to dissuade him from going, we watch Matt rush across the city to try to fight the children of Thanos. But by the time he gets there, the spaceship holding Peter, Tony, and Strange is already floating away. And Wong has left. We watch Matt walk home slowly. He keeps an ear and a nose out for disturbances, but the next thing we see is the 3 watching the news again, this time in Karen's apartment. Tony Stark is missing, along with others. The news shows Tony in the building that used to be Stark Tower, then Avengers Tower, and is now under new ownership. The next few days pass in a montage of tense scenes. I don't actually know what the timeline of Infinity War is supposed to be, but I'm guessing it's at least a couple of days. We see Matt in court, at home, dressed as Daredevil on the roof of the building, but he's always distracted, always thinking if he could have got there in time, he could have tipped the balance and stopped the aliens from taking New York's other most powerful superheroes. And then, one evening, they're just starting to relax, getting drinks at Josie's. Foggy's girlfriend Marcy is there too. She's wearing a new ring, and we realize they're celebrating Marcy and Foggy's engagement. Foggy makes a joke about how Matt better not tell any embarrassing college stories in his best man speech. When suddenly Matt tenses, cocks his head. He can tell something is wrong. He listens as people around them begin to turn to dust before anyone else notices. People scream, grab each other, and run haphazardly for the exits. Foggy and Karen watch as Marcy disintegrates, and then, right as they think the rest of them are safe, Matt turns to dust. Karen and Foggy yell for Marcy and Matt, but nothing happens. So they just sit there in the middle of the chaos and hold each other. The rest of the blip passes in a silent montage. We see a mass memorial service at Matt's church. We see dozens of poster boards showing pictures of lost congregants and person after person getting up to speak. And then finally Foggy gets up and talks about Matt while Karen and Maggie sit in tears in a pew. I don't know if Maggie would cry openly, but she's there, and she's sad. We switch scenes and we see Kingpin escape from prison in the chaos when half the guards disintegrate, and then he shows up at his house. He walks from room to room calling for Vanessa. She is gone, and finally one of his right-hand guys approaches him and tells him what happened. Fisk throws the guy against the wall and he crumples. We see Karen crying as she changes the sign out in front of their office to one that says Page and Nelson. Foggy can't look at her as he walks inside, past Matt's empty office. We see the two of them working on cases. We see years pass. Karen keeps noticing that Foggy gets tired more easily and keeps encouraging him to go home early. It seems they think it's just the effect of the depression he's been in since losing his best friend and his fiancée at the same time. But then, one day at the office, we see him throwing up, unable to stop. We see Kingpin walking into a tall building we can only see the front doors of, and shots of him rebuilding his criminal empire. His goons are blackmailing cops, killing criminals who refuse to join him, taking over drug businesses. And then we switch scenes again, and we see another prison, a girls' juvenile prison this time, minimum security, and a teenage girl, maybe 15 or so, stumbles out into the night. We see her break into a store and steal some cash and a long black hooded raincoat, which she uses to cover her orange jumpsuit and shiny black hair. She travels through the rainy night until she reaches a still suburban neighborhood. It's clear the house has been recently occupied. There's art in every room, shelves loaded with books, a desk with a laptop on sleep mode. She calls out, but nobody's there. She drops to her knees in the middle of the floor. And then we see Foggy at the doctor's office, and he comes out and tells Karen bad news, and the two of them sit in shock together. The implication is that he has cancer, and it's pretty bad. Next we see him in surgery, chemotherapy, resting at home, pale and sweaty, surrounded by pill bottles. We switch scenes, and the young woman who broke out of prison is standing and looking up at the front of Fisk's new tower, at a large neon sign at the top whose words we can't make out. Then we're inside the tower, and we see a sealed trap door that Fisk has just discovered, and he pries it open and climbs down and sees a door. On it there's a sign that says, Failed Experiments. Fisk opens the door and sees a dim lab. There are crates full of broken pieces of armor, empty cages and tanks, petri dishes and Bunsen burners, a case of large, brightly colored dead spiders, and a lot of biohazard containers. Then, we see Matt and various others reform in Josie's bar. There's a lot of chaos, and Marcy, also reformed, doesn't see Matt. She runs out into the street, but Matt feels his way to the counter and gets Josie's attention, trying to act like a normal blind man. Josie tells him where to go. He goes deathly pale, and then he shows up at the cancer treatment center at the hospital, and Karen throws herself at him, and then he senses Foggy, who he approaches slowly, trying not to cry. Foggy does cry, but because he hasn't seen Matt in 5 years and didn't expect to ever see him again. Foggy gets up at the end of the treatment in time to greet Marcy, who's also been unblipped and has just arrived. He goes slightly hysterical. Karen looks over at Matt, trying to give the couple some space, and he turns his head in Karen's direction, with his unfocused eyes, then drops to his knees by the chair, completely devastated. Karen puts her arm around him, mirroring the scene where she held Foggy just after the blip. She's thrilled to see him, but she knows it's got to be like having a truck rammed into him. One day he was just going about his business, and then he disintegrated, and then the next second he's missed 5 years, and Foggy might die. So she just sits and holds him, kneeling next to the chair as machines beep and people reunite around them. And then we see Matt cry, but it's obvious he's trying to make sure Foggy doesn't see. Then the words 3 months later appear on the screen. And we'd have Matt back in Hell's Kitchen, working with Foggy and Karen. We see a shot of the outside of a dingy concrete building, with a sign outside that says Page, Murdock, and Nelson, in both raised Roman letters and in Braille. It's always bugged me that they totally could have had their names in Braille on that metal sign. In this version of things anyway, they do, and for those who need a refresher, Matt and Foggy are both lawyers, but the plan at the end of the Daredevil show was that Karen would join the firm as an investigator, and I'm going to assume that happened. But Matt is exhausted, manic, kind of ragged at the edges, because Kingpin is still out. He's trying to be Daredevil and the only lawyer at Page, Murdock, and Nelson, because Foggy is out most of the time. Karen is trying to support both of them, but would really like Matt to stop trying to do 3 things at once. Lawyer, superhero, best friend of cancer patient. Karen tells him he can't even do one of those things well while trying to do all 3, and right now what they need is Matt working primarily in his best friend role, secondly in his lawyer role and thirdly in his superhero role. But it's clear Matt has trouble handling the emotions that come up when he sees Foggy weak, throwing up, in pain. He doesn't know what to do with Karen's or Marcy's tears. He refuses to listen when Foggy tries to talk about the future where he's not there. So we see Matt slipping out more and more often, missing times when he was supposed to go with Foggy to an appointment or collaborate on a case. He even misses times when he and Karen were just supposed to hang out. We see her sitting in Josie's, looking at her watch, frustrated, exhausted, and alone. She calls him. He doesn't pick up. The next day, he comes into the office, and she gets upset. But he gets defensive and doesn't apologize. She expresses sympathy because this is hard for her too, but in the next scene, he's just going after some disconnected criminals again and beating on them even worse than is normal for Matt. We see several of his victims taken to the hospital where Foggy has his treatments, and Karen and Foggy recognize some of Fisk's lackeys, and it's clear they know exactly how those guys ended up how they did. And we switch scenes. While beating up on one of those criminal groups, Matt encounters a few guys with weird physical deformities who tell them they don't work for Fisk anymore because he had them breathe in this unidentified chemical powder that he said would give them superpowers. And he also had them sell the powder to people on the street, tell them it was cocaine, and put trackers on them to monitor things like blood pressure and oxygen levels. Some of them got powers, but not very useful ones. Others, who aren't with them, got things like paralysis, rabies-like symptoms, or fast-acting cancers. And the scene cuts away, and we see Foggy alone at the hospital during a treatment. He looks awful. He's got bags under his eyes, his skin is sweaty and grayish, and his hair is thinning. He picks up his phone, scrolls to Matt's contact, and then sighs and shuts the screen off. He knows Matt isn't going to pick up. A nurse asks him if he's waiting for someone, and he makes some crack, but it's clear he's struggling to have a sense of humor about the whole thing. She smiles, kind of sadly, and walks away. We can't see the people around him. Just him and the IV and the phone. He stares at the phone again. He doesn't pick up. Cut back to Matt with the criminals. That last revelation, cancer, stops Matt up short. He demands the location of the lab where Fisk gave them the powder. One guy gives it to him. And then shots ring out, and one by one the criminals drop, shot in the head. Matt dodges again and is nearly clipped by a bullet as he throws himself through a window to avoid the shots. Meanwhile, we see Fisk in his new headquarters. He's in the middle of watching two of his henchpeople fight. One has steel claws, and the other is trying to spit out what looks like acid. The claw-handed person's clothes are steaming, but they're getting the jump on the acid spitter, and then Vanessa knocks on the door. Fisk is frustrated and wants to tell her to leave, but realizes she won't be happy about this, and this is supposed to show that she was blipped. Since she was blipped, Fisk and Vanessa trying to reconfigure their relationship, and it's not going well. They got married right before the blip, but even when things weren't perfect, and he went to prison immediately afterward, and then she was dusted. So he went so deeply into crime while she was gone that he doesn't seem to know how to let her back into his private or work life. Vanessa tells him she ordered a hit on some former Fisk employees. Fisk looks like he's not sure whether to be pleased by that or not, almost like he doesn't like her taking initiative. She says she thinks the sniper nearly killed Daredevil. Fisk, strangely, looks even more conflicted by that. He turns back to the two fighters and nods. The clawed fighter leaps at the acid spitter and before he can react, rips out his throat. Fisk smiles at her. One more test. We should switch scenes. It's evening, pretty late, and Karen arrives at their office in time to see Matt come out of the bathroom, wiping blood from his face. Hi, Karen, he says in this tone like nothing is wrong, but also like he knows they both know that everything is wrong. Karen doesn't let him get away with it. Where were you today? She tells him Marcy was late to an appointment with a client because Foggy was feeling really sick after his treatment, and no one was there to help him walk out to the taxi. I was busy. I think I got something on Fisk. Karen slams a pile of papers down at her desk and tells him that this isn't just affecting her and Foggy anymore, and maybe they've got to stop depending on him to do anything. She stops, glaring at him, waiting for him to answer for himself. Out of excuses, Matt's desperate. I just can't watch. You think this is just hard on you? Karen asked him angrily. Foggy was the only person I had for 5 years. You think I like to see him like this? No, Karen, that's not what I meant. I I just can't shake this feeling that if I can find the answer, I can fix this. Fix it? He has cancer, Matt. What are you doing right now? What he's doing right now is the only way to fix it, and you need to help him do it. You're making it harder for him. Sitting still in hospitals isn't my strong area. Matt's trying to make a joke about his own refusal to go in for medical attention when he needs it, but it doesn't work. Karen glares at him. He needs you, Matt, not Daredevil. That's not what I said. Karen shoots back. But it's exactly what you think. You think you can solve any problem by beating someone up, and when it turns out you can't, you run. Don't think I've forgotten the time you pretended to be dead. Foggy still isn't over that, neither am I. Matt ignores that comment, but he looks earnest. Karen, listen, I think Fisk is behind it. Karen laughs derisively. Wilson Fisk can't be blamed for everything. Sometimes there are just problems in the world that putting on a costume won't fix. But Matt won't budge. You're wrong. I'll prove you're wrong. He picks up a bag that was sitting behind his desk. Karen looks at it, and Matt can tell where she's looking. It's obvious she knows the Daredevil suit is in the bag, and she's not happy about it. But Matt hesitates only for a moment, hefts the bag over his shoulder, and walks out into the street. And we cut away. We see Fisk with Vanessa in an office. He's watching Matt walk away from Paige, Nelson, and Murdock through a security camera feed. You watch him constantly, Wilson, Vanessa says softly in his ear. We could kill him now. Finish this. Fisk hesitates, and then he says, Matt is suffering, and as a result, so is his fighting. He's unfocused. He can't sleep. Instead, he's out in the streets. Every day increases he'll get himself killed doing something unwise. I won't make him a martyr. He already believes he is one. There's a long pause. And I need him alive. If any of my experiments succeed, we can use the Devil of Hell's kitchen to test their strength. And then we'll rid ourselves of him. Fisk pauses. Finally he says, Of course. Cut back to Matt. He finds the lab belonging to the Kingpin connected group that is still pretending to sell drugs, but as Matt has figured out, is actually trying to get human test subjects for dubious experiments. It's the lab that he thinks might have the cure for Foggy. It's not the failed experiments lab. While exploring it, a little piece of black goo crawls up his leg. He has accidentally picked up the Venom symbiote. So that's it for now, and the next part will pick up in a few days. Bye!